For most of the 20th century, if you asked a scientist what makes a great team, they probably would have just shrugged. The entire field was completely obsessed with the idea of the lone genius, that brilliant individual. So how do we go from pretty much ignoring teams altogether to making them the absolute center of the modern workplace? Let's dig into that journey from the lone wolf to the coordinated pack.
For the longest time, this was the central debate. What's more powerful, a single brilliant mind or a really well-coordinated team? I mean, we've all seen the movies about the lone hero who saves the day. But let's be real, in the actual world, the most complex problems we face, they're almost always solved by groups. And yet, for decades, science was laser-focused on the individual. And this is going to sound crazy, but for the first half of the 20th century, the entire field of applied psychology basically pretended teams didn't exist. The focus was so sharp on understanding, measuring, and optimizing one person at a time. The group, it was just background noise. I mean, it kind of makes sense when you think about it, right? The whole system was built around individuals. Companies hired individuals, they trained individuals, and they paid individuals. This idea of analyzing the team as its own complex, living thing, it just wasn't even on the radar. So just how big was this blind spot? Well, get this. For 32 consecutive years, the most prestigious publication in the field, the Journal of Applied Psychology, did not publish a single article on work teams. Not one. It was as if in the world of science, they just didn't exist. And if you look at the data, the story becomes crystal clear. From the 1950s all the way through the 1980s, research on teams, it barely even registered. It was a total flatline. I mean, sure, a few studies here and there, but there was no real momentum. The topic was a scientific backwater. This quote from the psychologist Ivan Steiner, it just perfectly captures the vibe back then. He said, "The study of groups seemed rather dead, and that, quote, even the immediate family did not seem deeply grieved." That's how completely out of fashion this whole area of research had become. But then, bam, the 1990s hit and everything changed. The world was suddenly becoming way more complex, more global, and way more fast-paced. All of a sudden, that lone wolf model just wasn't cutting it anymore, and organizations desperately needed to figure out how to build effective teams just to survive. And look what happens to that chart. Remember that flat line from before? Well, it just explodes. It shoots up into this incredible exponential curve. Now, this wasn't just a small shift in interest. It was a full-blown revolution. The study of teamwork went from being totally ignored to being one of the hottest topics in psychology practically overnight. So what happened? What caused this massive explosion? Well, it was basically a perfect storm of global pressures. Work got way more complex, competition was fierce, and some very public military failures made it painfully clear. Understanding team dynamics, well, it wasn't just an academic curiosity anymore. It was a matter of economic and even national security. Okay, so with all this new research flooding in, scientists finally had enough data to start cracking the code. They could move past that simple old individual versus group debate and start building a real, unified model of what actually makes a team work. And what they found, after all this work, was a surprisingly elegant formula. Turns out, team effectiveness really boils down to three core pillars: the task and its structure, the people on the team, and the team's dynamics. If you can get these three things right, you've got a high-performing team. So let's break them down. The first key is composition. And this one's pretty straightforward. It's all about who is on the team. It's that specific cocktail of skills, knowledge, abilities, and yes, personalities that every single member brings to the table. Now, early on, the thinking here was pretty simple. Like, do you just want a team with the highest average IQ? Or maybe just one superstar? But the research now shows it's way, way more nuanced than that. The focus has shifted to the mix of people, their diversity of thought, their different backgrounds, and how they actually complement each other. It's about avoiding those fault lines that can split a team right down the middle. All right, so if composition is the who, then our second key, process, is all about the how. How does the team actually work together? It's the rhythm of their collaboration, how they talk, how they coordinate, how they handle conflict to turn all their individual talents into one collective result. And here's what's so cool. Great teams have this distinct rhythm. They move through a cycle. First, there's a transition phase where they're all about planning and strategy. Then, they shift into an action phase to execute. But here's the critical part.
They are always in an interpersonal phase, constantly managing relationships and motivation. Mastering this rhythm, well, that's what separates the good teams from the truly great ones. Okay, so we've cracked the code for the traditional team. But here's the twist. The very idea of a stable, long-term team is kind of becoming a thing of the past. The future of work, it's a lot more fluid. This has led to this new concept called teaming. You can think of it as teamwork on the fly. It's about assembling a diverse group of experts for one specific project and then, poof, disbanding just as quickly when it's done. The new game is all about adaptability and flexibility. And this is what that looks like in the real world. A team might form, restructure itself a month later, form a little subgroup, add a new member, and then completely dissolve, all inside of a single quarter. The old static models of teamwork, they just can't keep up. So this creates a massive challenge, right? For researchers, for managers, for everyone. If the players on the field and even the rules of the game are constantly in flux, how in the world do you measure what's working? How do you build a science around something so temporary? Well, the answer lies in a whole new generation of tools. Instead of just relying on surveys, scientists are now using things like social network analysis to map who's talking to whom. They're using AI to analyze language patterns, and they're even using wearable sensors to capture streams of real-time data. We're moving from taking static snapshots to watching high-definition movies of teamwork as it actually happens. So after a century of study, the science is pretty clear. The lone wolf is a myth. Success today belongs to the coordinated, fluid pack. And that leaves us with a really critical question to ask ourselves. Is the team you're on built for the stable world of the past, or is it ready for the fast, flexible future of teaming?